This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.
Hello, this is Kathy King from For Flux Sake, and Matt, Rose, and I want to send our love and support out to all the artists, potters, sculptors, and craftspeople impacted by Hurricane Helene in Western North Carolina. Though this event occurred weeks ago, there are so many individuals still struggling to rebuild. If you are in a position to do so, please consider donating to the Craft Emergency Relief Fund. You can go to surfplus.org to learn more. Thank you. Hello, my name is Kathy King, and welcome to the For Flux Sake podcast. I'm coming to you from the Harvard Ceramics program in our fair city, Allston, Massachusetts. I'm here with Rose and Matt Katz of the world-famous Ceramic Materials Workshop, and they are ready to answer your burning questions about clay and glaze. Hello, Matt and Rose.
Hey, Kathy.
Hello, Kathy.
It's fall here in New England. The leaves are brilliant and falling from the trees, and it is time to vote. Are you guys getting excited?
I love voting.
Matt's been excited for months.
and you all live in a hotbed. You live in the state of New Hampshire here in the States, which is one of the most watched states when we do have an election, or presidential anyway.
We are swingish, but yeah. I will say, I won't talk specific politics, but I will say I have been surveyed. So, all those people are like, well, I don't know anybody who's ever been polled.
Really?
I've been polled multiple times this election.
Wow, interesting.
Yes.
It's true. I don't know anybody who's ever actually been surveyed.
Live in a swing state. They want your opinion.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I was going to say, in Boston, the channel that we watch on the news, we get all of the New Hampshire political commercials, and those are so wackadoodle. What are you people doing? Jeez Louise. It's like crazy montages of things that are like, don't really, go with each other. It's like, people on the streets and chimpanzees and banana shortages and
you want to get really offended, Kathy?
Yeah, sure, Matt.
There is a candidate for governor. I won't name names. Literally, their slogan on all their signage is "Don't mass up New Hampshire."
Oh, it's far too late.
But we won't talk about specific politics, but we bring this up briefly before we get into the show because it is election season here in the United States. And we won't tell you who to vote for. You vote for who you believe in, but please vote. Young people, this is a podcast. There theoretically are young people listening. Please vote.
Oh, I hope.
Yes. Please vote. Doesn't matter who you vote for, just vote.
Get out and do it. Your vote matters. And yeah, we're joking about Rose and I living in a swingish state. Even if you live in California or Texas and you think your vote doesn't matter, it does. Vote, 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 vote. If you are not registered, hopefully you can still register in your state, but go out and vote on election day. It absolutely matters. We are participatory democracy here in the United States. So get involved. Voting is literally the least that you can do. So
I already voted in my beloved Commonwealth of Massachusetts by mail,
Nice.
which is lovely. Although you do bring it to the post, you bring it to the post office and put it in the slot, and then it's instantly start thinking of conspiracy theories. That's where we are in this country. And as long as we're not recording this podcast from bunkers next time, we're
We don't
Hopefully.
have early voting in our state. You got to go in person.
Yeah, you got to wait in line.
Yeah. So
Yep.
we'll be there on election day. So if you see us, if you live in our district, we'll be there. You don't live in our district. I think we have one listener in our
I know,
area.
right?
They're not even in our
Yeah.
town.
The sheep
maybe.
across the street from y'all are like, you got it.
Yeah, the geese have an opinion too.
Yeah,
So
Yeah. The sheep are very anti-farmer. Vote down the farmer.
So y'all, I was totally geeking out on your YouTube because I finally got to see the glow in the dark episode. And
Ooh.
yeah, so if for those that don't know what I'm talking about, give a little intro.
well, quickly. It's called Glow Up. It's on our YouTube channel, Ceramic Materials Workshop, if you don't know it. And it's all about glow in the dark glaze.
Hey.
So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
So why this was so fascinating to me, because you cited it that when it was your first NCECA together, which was so romantic in San Diego.
Yes,
and then you told the story about how somebody came up to you and gave you this tile and said, look at it in the dark. And it ended up being a glow in the dark. And I was at that NCECA and I remember that. And I've been telling this story forever, like whatever happened to those people who were giving them out. So
okay, so I can update, because since we released the video, we were contacted by those people, and they actually, I'm still waiting, but they have said that they'll send us a new one of their original tiles. They think they have them around. But yeah, they were trying to sell it as a glaze. And it was a person named Brian Jensen, and he was out in Utah. He's still in ceramics, and he had cracked it back then. And he was selling it as Gloze, Gloze, the glow in the dark glaze. The website is gone, but those of you who don't know, there's this amazing tool called the Internet Wayback Machine, where you can literally just search for a term in the past, and they have archived websites that are dead. And
although every time I hear that, I cringe, like, oh, what kind of awful things were out there?
I don't know, Rose, what were you doing in your 20s?
I don't remember.
But yeah, so I remember the tile, and it was exactly the story that we told. Those of you who were at NCECA in San Diego, there was this fountain out by the courtyard, and Rose and I were sitting there, and we were soaking up the California sun, and literally he slid up to us and put a test tile in our hands.
Yeah, little does he know who we were.
I mean, it's kind of wild that it's been this long, and now in 2024, you're actually showing how it was done. I mean, so wow, ceramics moving at a snail's pace.
Yay!
Yeah, it was not a high priority, and I had some of our students ask me about them a couple of years ago now. And so I'd started poking around because I didn't think it was that hard. It couldn't have been that hard of a problem. And what we had found is that there are two major glow-in-the-dark powders. One is called zinc sulfide, and the other is called europium doped strontium aluminate. And those are the two major.
10 times fast. Right?
Oh, I know. I had to say it 10 times.
I wrote the script, and I kept putting it in there just to get Rose tongue-tied.
Yeah.
But what you can find is that europium doped strontium aluminate will survive in a kiln. Zinc sulfide completely burns out. Don't even bother. Like, it won't even last in an oven. It'll kill zinc sulfide. But the europium definitely does last. Those of you who have watched the video will know that unfortunately that the glow in the dark glazes, they do work.
Don't give it away.
But
no spoilers.
Gotta watch the video.
Yep.
There are limitations, I will say. But what I will tell that we don't really talk about in the video is that the cracking the code on the glow in the dark glazes, it was not the glowing part that's the hard part. that's not particularly special. It was getting a glaze that melted. That was really difficult.
Yeah, that was the fascinating part.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you see my big guns, Kathy?
Oh, they were the
Did you love
biggest,
them?
Rose. I was, believe me,
They were
I was
awesome.
applauding from my living room for sure. I mean, for real, I'm such a fan of the videos. The graphics are amazing. The set's amazing. So you guys are killing it. So thank you. Thank you for that.
We do have to shout out. Rose and I get all the attention, but we do have a couple of folks that work for us, and one of them is Megan. And Megan is our secret weapon who has she does all the graphics and the effects, and she shoots it with Rose, and
she's amazing.
Megan is amazing. Shout out to Megan.
You should chain her to your desk, because if you lose that child, you're in big trouble.
Well, as long as, and Megan and I work pretty well together for the YouTube. We have a good time when we're recording. And I think you can tell that in that video too.
Yeah.
So.
They kick me out. They don't want me around.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It's a girl party.
Well, we should get to some questions because we've got so many in the queue. So let's get going. We shall start out with Margaret from Sarasota, Florida, who has a question about using that microwave.
Hey, Matt, Kathy, and Rose. Margaret here from Sarasota, Florida. I'm a studio manager here for a local pottery studio. I love the podcast. Thank you so much. I particularly like when Matt goes off on tangents and rants. It's my favorite. But my question for you today is, why does handmade pottery get hotter when you microwave it than commercial pottery? Thank you so much. Toodles.
Toodles. I love it. Nice.
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah, it is a good question.
Well, hold on. I want to talk more about how much she likes me ranting.
Oh, for goodness sakes. Give the people what they want. Apparently, at least we're giving Margaret in Sarasota, Florida, what she wants. Not necessarily the people on the podcast, but.
Well, I want to survey. Why do you guys think now? So what she's talking about is that ceramics should be insulators, right? They should reject heat. So I want to ask you, why do you guys think?
No.
Come on.
I know the answer.
You don't get it.
Yes. Rose, what's the answer?
Well, commercial clay bodies are very vitrified, and so they don't absorb any moisture, while handmade pottery can and does absorb water because they're not fully vitrified. So when you put that lovely handmade mug in the microwave and your commercial mug in the microwave, and you pull them both out and your handmade's hot, it's because the water in it is hot.
Correct.
And the commercial
what
one,
does Rose win?
A roast chicken.
Ding, ding,
A roast chicken.
Ooh.
Chicken.
He gets quality time with me ranting about stuff that's not ceramics.
Sorry.
See, Margaret, me ranting, it's only cute on the show. You live with me 24/7 for 20 years.
Oh,
Not so
no. I know how to tune you out. I just,
That's why she has those headphones.
Exactly.
Of course, as with all things, Rose is correct. It's all about the water. And let's just beat that dead horse while we're at it, everybody.
Oh, yeah. I think we've talked about this on plenty.
This is why vitrification matters. Now we'll talk about the vitrification. I want to flip back because I was laying a trap for Kathy. Because I was hoping sheepishly that she would have said something that you'll hear some people argue as to why this happens. And I do want to just point at that not being the case.
So you're assuming I would give the wrong answer.
I was
Well, no, you're right. You're right.
I was hoping. I was optimistic.
They were good. It was good odds, Matt. Yeah, I can't blame you.
So one of the things you'll hear people say is that it's the quote unquote metals in ceramics that get hot. And that is completely and utterly not correct. We don't, and so we have to clarify something because just want to contextualize this. We don't have metals in ceramics. Unless you have lusters, which we have talked about in the show, or technically
which you shouldn't put in the microwave,
which you should not put in the microwave. They can spark. Or copper reds actually technically are a metal. You're actually forming metallic or what they call colloidal copper. That's not a problem in the microwave because it's so small. But we don't use metals in ceramics. And this, I just want to point out, people look at material that has a metallic form, and a metal is when you can bond an element to itself. So an iron bonded to an iron bonded to an iron is a metal. In fact, that's called metallic bonding. But when you bond it with an oxide, which is what we do, it is no longer a metal, and you can't call it a metal. That's not what metals are. So, and people really like to think this like, oh, aluminum makes metal, so it's no, that's not how this works. Because if you look at the periodic table, literally everything from where glass formers are, which is sort of the silicon, phosphorus, arsenic line, to the left, every single element over there makes a metal. So calcium makes a metal. Potassium makes a metal. Sodium makes a metal. So it's not because of metals. As soon as it's bonded with oxygen, it is no longer considered a metal. And so it doesn't react with the microwave. It should be insulated. And so the real answer that Rose said is the microwave.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the Academy and my mom and dad and the cat
and the dogs
and the children. Go to bed, kids. It's past your bedtime. Love you.
Oh my
You're the
God.
reason I do this.
Well, that was a great question. I mean, so simple, but actually fabulous. Rose got her day in the sun. This is a beautiful day.
But yeah, it is a simple answer, but it is water. So microwaves work because they literally send a microwave, a small wave that will activate particles. So those who don't know, they bounce off of particles, and if they're susceptible to it, like water is, they will literally shake and vibrate. So they generate their own heat, and water can do that, and ceramics don't. So yeah, it is the water. And again, vitrify people. This is why it matters. And this is why, that 3% absorption, that 1.5% absorption on your cone 6 body is not cool. Add it to the list of all the reasons why clay bodies need to be vitrified. But the commercial dinnerware, they have to sell it as completely vitrified. That is in the FDA standards. The FDA standards on dinnerware are very small. It's about 5 things, and one of them is non-absorbent. And if it's not absorbent, then it can't absorb water, and the water is not there to get hot. So, yeah, vitrify. Did I mention vitrify?
Okay. All right. So let's move on. And I do want to note that our next question comes from Ruth from New Zealand. And producer Ben asked me to do this in a New Zealand accent. And because I hope to travel to New Zealand someday,
Yes,
I will not be doing that. So we will
travel to New Zealand to get beaten up.
Exactly. But you know what? This is, I even though I much prefer when people send us those voice memos, this actually is one that I am going to enjoy reading. So here we go. Ruth from New Zealand. Ruth says, I work with the crayons of the glaze world, Cone 6 commercial brushing glazes. I've got a few years worth of accumulated sludge from washing brushes, etc., and would like to have a go at making a usable glaze out of it. It turns out it fires to a lovely poo brown color. Without any idea of the chemistry, could you advise me on what colorants I could use to start experimenting?
Well,
I mean,
start with the brown, so
right?
You might as well make
Do
a
you
black.
want dark brown or darker brown?
I mean, I guess you could make a blue
Rainbow.
brown. You
Mhm.
could,
Yeah, maybe.
you could
God
experiment a
love these
little bit.
the children who are keeping the sludge off of their brushes being washed in water. Oh my God.
I like that she refers to the crayons of the glaze world.
I usually say the
realize.
acrylics, but yeah, crayons is even better. The Crayola markers of the ceramic world.
Well, but we do, Rose, you do have to give yourself some credit that back when Rose was in the tile industry, she was working with a similar concept. That you had created glazes that were new glazes made from essentially glaze waste.
Well, new colors, I
New
should
colors.
say. Yeah. So the factory I worked with had a glaze pit from the
That's
glaze
where I
line
live.
that
I sleep at night in the glaze pit.
in the glaze pit. That's the punishment room in our house, the glaze pit. So all our wash off from our glaze line went into this glaze pit, and we accumulated buckets and barrels full and didn't know what to do with it. So one day I was like, let's see what we can get out of it. So I fired it up and it came out like this soft kind of celadon-y green. I was like, well, that's kind of odd. It's like red in its raw state and it comes out green. That's pretty cool. So the people who owned the factory at the time were like, well, we're going to make a glaze out of it. I said, okay.
I think wasn't there also some mention that they didn't want to spend the money to dispose of it?
Yes. Yeah. Well, yes, that's always the case. They don't want to spend the money on anything. So we're going to pay you to make it reusable. So, I came up with this whole palette of colors using this reclaimed stuff. It's a whole process. You have to homogenize it. You have to break it into specific sizes, figure out the water content, figure out the color you're dealing with, because each time you pull out of this pit, it would change color slightly. And then you had to figure out your water content. You had to figure out, what color you're going to make it into. And we had a wide variety. We went from blues to greens to browns to like almost like a rusty reddish color, which was really cool. So yeah, I mean, you could experiment with that. I mean, unfortunately, you're starting with a poo brown, as Ruth had said, but you can make that into different colors. But try a larger batch of it, see if it comes out the same color. You can make a brown, you can turn it a bluish color, you can turn it to a black. Pretty
a dark
easy.
green might work with some chrome or stains. Don't forget stains. Stains will cover. I mean, the glazes are probably pretty stain heavy based anyway. So
probably, yeah. But yeah, you could totally make some new colors out of it. Use it. Just make sure you know your water content, how much you're adding, and control your specific gravity and your viscosity to keep it consistent. And yeah,
I'm wondering like what quantity we're talking about. Like what?
She said it was a public studio, didn't she?
Oh, true. Runs a studio. Yeah, works at a community studio.
I mean, probably could be some 5-gallon buckets.
Could be. Yeah.
Like 15,000 mils.
I mean, we take all our. We have settling tanks, or not tanks, but like these big bins, and you have to rinse off anything that's touched glazes or containers, brushes, whatnot, in one bin, then a second bin, a third, and then you can rinse with clean waters, because we get our sinks checked on a regular basis for any metals or whatnot. And so when we settle out those bins, we take the sludge and it goes into these barrels that are non-toxic barrels. And when they fill, then I call a company and they come and take them away. And essentially the person told me they just go to a landfill.
Yeah.
So it's a whole lot of, bother, but I guess just rather than putting it in the dumpster. But anyway, so every 3 to 4 months, somebody has the brilliant idea of like, what if we made something out of it? What kind of glaze would this
And
make?
Kathy's like,
So,
we're going to put the lid on it and seal it and never talk about this again. Thank you very much.
Exactly. But no, we've done, I mean, so on occasion, just to satisfy the masses, we, take it out and, and it's always poo brown. It's consistent, you know.
Yeah, a lot of iron, which is probably in many of the glazes. It's going to default to the darkest color it can make. And iron, you combine a brown thing with some greens and some blues. It's going to default to brown most of the time. But you can color brown. Just know they're going to go darker colors.
Yeah, and it will be different every time. Sometimes it will be like lighter or darker. It just depends on what's going in that sludge.
Yeah. But I mean, the interesting thing that you had sort of proven when you were doing that for the company is that because you had a specific palette of glazes and it was always the same glazes coming through, that the sort of the textural melt result was actually kind of consistent.
Yeah, it was. Well, until we homogenized it. So we mix it in large quantities. So we take not just a barrel, we would take like 10 barrels and put them in this big mixer, homogenize it, and then test what that color's coming out of. So, and we had a lot of whites, a lot of like just lighter colors. So influenced the overall color of it. That's how it kind of came out, this greenish color. But yeah, I mean, if we ran a lot of browns that month, then yeah, it would come out slightly brown, or it just
So it was being used.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was in production.
Yeah, it was in
wow.
production. It was called the Reclamation series, and it was all different colors. Like sold throughout the
funny.
U.S.
Oh, she won an
Wow.
environmentalism award for it.
I didn't. The
Rose?
company did.
Oh,
You
okay.
did it. You got
Yeah.
you get the award.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's awesome. We work with a design class in the spring from the Graduate School of Design here in Harvard. And I was just thinking, like, I need to pitch that to the professor, is have them do the project and they have to use the sludge
Yeah.
glaze.
Mhm.
I don't want them
Yeah.
to get into like chemistry, but like find a reason to use it. Like what, because they usually are there to design architectural facades or different tile or evaporative cooling methods or blah, blah, acoustic tile, all that type of stuff.
That collection and homogenization point that Rose made, you really can't underemphasize though.
Okay.
That will help you have less total chaos. It does mean that you
Okay.
sort of have to store more and deal with it, but it leads to, and I think I might have mentioned this before on the show, but we have someone that we worked with that had mentioned a studio practice where they worked in very large, like 55-gallon drums of glaze, and that they would rebatch when they were only halfway through the batch of glaze. And that helped them to keep it more homogenized over time because it wasn't a fresh batch every time. It was averaging out with the previous batch. And that sort of same concept you want to keep in mind if you're trying to reclaim sludge, that if you're just like, oh, well, here's my 5-gallon bucket and I'm just going to use this one, that's where it's going to be a lot more work. But if you can get a bunch of them and sort of proportionalize all of them and average them together over time, it'll be much more consistent and controllable.
Well, and always expect it not to be exactly the same.
Mhm.
It's never going to
Gotcha.
be exactly the same.
Yeah, and there's something nice about that, I think, in the right application. Okay. So y'all, let's keep going because we're on a streak here. So our next question, I must read again, people. This question
Y'all are
comes.
failing Kathy.
I know. God, my throat's so dry. This is from Jane in the UK, and Jane asked, "I'm using coarse lithium carbonate." Good for you, Jane. For specific glaze effects at low fire. It's working great, but the material is expensive and hard to find, especially in the UK. What materials can I use to achieve similar results without raising the firing temperature or losing the matte finish? Boy, is this a question on many people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Margaret started off this episode saying how much she loved me ranting. Well, this is the opposite. Nothing, Jane. Sucks to be you.
Ooh, those are harsh words. Ouch.
Yeah. No, for those of you who've never used coarse lithium carbonate, it's lithium carbonate. It's just chunky. It's a little chunky, a little bit funky. And it's nice it sort of adds in these little melted in granules to a glaze. One of my close friends, Ann Courier, she does some wonderful sculptures where you just get these it adds this like speckly melted point to them. Unfortunately, the briefness of my answer is because there's not much else that you can use. So lithium carbonate is a lithium oxide molecule combined with carbon dioxide. And lithium is an alkali metal flux. And there are 3 of them that we use: lithium, sodium, potassium. And those all do play the same role in our glazes. The problem with those are why people tend to use lithium carbonate as opposed to soda ash, which is sodium carbonate, and pearl ash, which is potassium carbonate, is because they are all water soluble, which means they're going to dissolve when you mix them with water, like sugar in your coffee. And sodium and potassium are much, much more soluble than lithium. Lithium solubility is 12.9 grams per liter. So if you mix 13 grams of lithium carbonate into a liter of water, it will disappear, all of it. Sodium's is much worse. It's 340 grams per liter. And potassium pearl ash is 1,103 grams per liter. So yeah, you can literally dissolve 1,100 grams of pearl ash into water. So that's really bad. Lithium carbonate is definitely soluble, but it's orders of magnitude less soluble than the other 2. So, like theoretically, you'd go, oh yeah, I'll get coarse soda ash or coarse pearl, because then it's just going to dissolve even more. So yeah, there aren't great substitutes. For thinking creatively, the first things that come to my mind is maybe playing with glaze granules.
Yeah, that was my thinking. What if you use like chunk frit?
Right.
Granted that's hard to find, but like just granulated frit.
Right. And can you remember, Rose, we were looking at a company that was here in the United States that literally makes chunky colored glasses that are meant to be added in. And that there are some commercial products. I think one of them is called like Jungle Gems or something. There are commercial glazes that have these little chunklets mixed into them, and they'll often call them like crystals. They're not crystals. They're literally like colored glasses. And when you get those commercial glazes, they literally have like chunks of things you have to spread on there, and then they just melt out like that. I know there's a company here in the US, which does not help Jane being in the UK. I'm sure they exist
there might be other
somewhere.
things in the UK. Yeah.
But I'm completely blanking on the name of that company that does, but you can buy those little chunks of glass that will do a similar thing, but it's not going to be exact the same as lithium carbonate. The other one, there are some DIY solutions. I know Joe Thompson, Old Forge Online, he has a series of glazes where he has been calcining glaze. So take a glaze batch, mixed up into sort of very coarse particles, and then fire it up to a relatively low temperature. Like I think it's like 015. I forget exactly what it is. He has it all documented on his blog. But he then fires the glaze up to a very low temperature so it doesn't melt, but the particles sinter, which is like physically sticking together. And then he takes that after the firing, he sieves out all the small stuff, keeps the chunks, and then mixes that into a new glaze. And he has a glaze out there, I think he calls it strawberries and cream, where he literally has just taken a red, like I think it's a chrome tin red glaze, calcined it, gotten out the big chunks, and then he mixes that back into a white base. So you get these little red spots in there. That may work. It's going to be more work on your part, and I think that's the answer. Is that there's a couple of things that may be okay, but none of them are going to be as simple as just throwing a bunch of coarse lithium.
Well, so expensive or lots of work? Which one?
Right.
That's the metric. That's the metric.
I feel bad for Jane.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
tough one. The
Yeah.
I feel
lithium.
bad for all of us, really, when it comes to lithium.
We're here to. Well, that's it. That's we've talked about the lithium prices. I can't see them ever coming back.
No,
The way battery technology has worked and the evolution of what batteries are and the rise, especially of EVs. And like we said, we're not complaining. Rose and I drive an EV. We love EVs. They're the future, but they are literally buying lithium carbonate and spodumene. That is what EV batteries are made from. And so we can't compete with, Elon Musk and his evil empire.
And it's funny, just quickly to explain to the community that, okay, lithium carbonate, this is a thing. It's really expensive. I can't make these glazes for y'all anymore. But that just doesn't really get a reaction. But if you say spodumene, because the spodumene glaze has been such a staple in so many community studios for so long, then that's when I get the wailing and the hair pulling. And
spodumene is
tough to be
interesting
me.
that's easier to replace if you know your chemistry.
Mhm.
The thing about lithium is that lithium, again, it's often perceived as being magic, especially the lithium carbonate. People are like, this is some magic ingredient. Lithium carbonate is not magic. Lithium carbonate is just a concentrated source of alkali metal fluxes, and all of our glazes have alkali metal fluxes, lithium, sodium, or potassium. The problem is they all come in the form of a feldspar, which is the alkali metal, lithium, sodium, potassium, tied up with silica and aluminum. And those are the cheapest non-water soluble forms of those materials that we have. The catch with lithium carbonate, why people think it's so special, is that it's the alkali metal flux not tied in with silica and alumina, so you can really mainline massive amounts of that flux. And lithium carbonate, because its solubility is less than, most people are okay working with it. It's not an ideal material. We've talked before in the past about, when it gets cold and people start growing crystals in their buckets of glaze. That's a lithium carbonate problem. That is the solubility in lithium carbonate precipitating, losing its solubility. And it's not a magic material, and then the cost gets worse. Spodumene, you pretty much can use nepheline cyanide and you can recreate any spodumene glaze because in the feldspar form, it's not special.
I've always avoided spodumene too because of the surfactant. Like it just bubbles. Like that's such a pain in the butt.
Yeah. Those of you who haven't worked with spodumene, what Rose is talking about is that when you mix up spodumene glazes, they will tend to be very foamy when you mix them with water. And that's because they treat the rock, they process it with a surfactant, which is essentially a soap, to purify the raw material. And they dry it, but it never gets out. And so when you mix it with water, again, it'll tend to foam up like you put a bunch of hand washing soap in there. And it can be a pain in the butt.
I didn't know that. How have we been doing this for years? And that's the first time you've used the word surfactant.
Rose used it. I'm just following along with Rose. She's
want my money back.
I am.
All right. Well, we are way out of time. So until we see each other again, farewell.
Doodles.
Au revoir, Kathy.
Well, folks, that's it for this week's episode of For Flux Sake. I'd like to thank the listeners who submitted questions this week. And if you want your question answered on the show, shoot us an email at ForFluxSakePodcast@gmail.com. So join us next time. And when in your studio, remember what Rose always says.
Always remember to test, test, test. This is a test of the emergency glaze system.